Hello and welcome back to Peaceful Soul. If this is your first time here, thank you for joining us. This is a space where we slow down together, reflect, and talk about something that might seem small but is actually one of the most important things in modern life: focus, clarity, and the ability to truly live in the present moment. Let me start with a simple question. When was the last time you sat down and read an entire book without picking up your phone? Or the last time you watched a full movie without checking messages? Scrolling through Instagram, or glancing at notifications? If you're like most people, it's probably been a while, and you're not alone. We live in an age where stimulation never stops. The moment we open our eyes, our phone lights up: emails, podcasts, short videos, background music, endless notifications. It feels like a storm hitting our brain all at once. And the result is clear: we are slowly losing our ability to focus. This isn't just a feeling. Research from Microsoft showed that the average human attention span has dropped significantly over the past 2 decades. Some studies even suggest that today's humans can focus for less time than a goldfish. Think about that. We've built a culture where a tiny creature swimming in circles in a bowl has more patience than we do. But the internet isn't the only culprit. This problem started long before smartphones, long before YouTube or TikTok. It began with what seemed like a harmless shift, moving from a culture of reading to a culture of television. In 1985, cultural critic Neil Postman published Amusing Ourselves to Death. He argued that when society left behind reading and entered the television era, we gave up our ability for deep focus. Books force the brain to follow carefully, to reason, to imagine. Television, on the other hand, chops everything into easy-to-digest fragments. Over time, this reshaped the way we think. Think back to 19th-century America. Abraham Lincoln and Stephen Douglas held political debates that lasted for hours. And thousands of people patiently listened. Just a century later, in the 1960 Kennedy-Nixon debate, things had changed. Television brought politics into living rooms. But the debate lasted only an hour. What people remembered wasn't the policies, it was Nixon's pale, tired appearance on screen. The image outweighed the argument. Fast forward to today. We've moved from television to the internet, to social media, to videos that last just seconds. The result is a distracted society where many of us can't even finish a 2-minute article without switching apps. But here's the important truth. This isn't your fault. Your brain has been shaped, intentionally, by design. Platforms like Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok are built on decades of behavioral science research. Back in 1999, Stanford professor B.J. Fogg founded the Persuasive Technology Lab, exploring how technology could shape human behavior. Those ideas later influenced how modern platforms are engineered to keep you hooked. Every notification, every like, every comment is designed to trigger dopamine, making it harder to put your phone down. The good news is that the human brain is neuroplastic. It can change with training. If it can be wired to lose focus, it can also be retrained to regain it. And that's the journey we'll take together today. In this video, we'll trace the story from books to television, from TV to the internet, and from the internet to social media. I'll share scientific research, real-life stories from American life, and personal experiences. Most importantly, I'll give you practical steps at the end so you can start rebuilding your focus, starting today. So grab a cup of tea, find a quiet corner, and stay with me until the end. Because if you've ever wondered why your mind feels scattered, or why it's harder to focus than it used to be, you're not alone. We're all in this together. And together, we can learn to take back control. Welcome to Peaceful Soul. Let's begin. It's hard for many young Americans today to imagine. But there was once a time when printed books were the primary gateway to knowledge. From the 18th century through the mid-20th century, American culture was deeply rooted in reading. People would spend hours poring over newspapers, diving into long novels, or attending public debates that stretched on for entire afternoons. This habit cultivated an extraordinary ability to focus. People could follow complex trains of thought for extended periods without distraction. Historical accounts describe crowds standing for hours in the sun, listening attentively to speeches and debates without complaint. They didn't grow restless or demand shorter talks. Instead, They cheered for complex arguments. Today, if someone tried to deliver a 3-hour lecture, half the audience would likely leave within minutes, conditioned as we are by the rapid-fire rhythm of TikTok and YouTube Shorts. The turning point came with the arrival of television. By the 1950s, the TV set had become a permanent fixture in nearly every American household. Moving images, lively sound, and the blend of news with entertainment made television irresistibly engaging. In his book Amusing Ourselves to Death, Neil Postman warned that television was not a neutral tool, it reshaped how people think. Instead of digging into words and ideas, we were drawn to short, image-driven bursts of instant emotion. A defining moment came with the first televised presidential debate in 1960 between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. Radio listeners thought Nixon had the stronger arguments, but television viewers believed Kennedy had won, impressed by his confident presence and youthful appearance, while Nixon appeared tired and sweaty. From that moment on, image began to outweigh logic, and American politics entered an era where the camera lens held as much power as reason itself. It wasn't just politics that shifted, daily life did too. Evenings once spent reading together at home gave way to families gathered around the TV. Game shows, talk shows, and sitcoms became cultural rituals. A 1970s study in the Journal of Communication found that the average television shot lasted only about 7 to 8 seconds before cutting to the next. This rapid editing style subtly rewired our brains, making us accustomed to constant change instead of patient, sustained thought. Older generations of psychologists often expressed regret. They grew up with massive works like Moby Dick or Gone with the Wind, while today's youth often struggle to finish a long article in the New York Times. This isn't a personal failing, it's the result of a radically altered cultural environment. Television didn't just shorten our attention span, it also transformed the very way we process information. Reading requires imagination, connecting ideas, and building mental images from text. Television, by contrast, delivers packaged images and emotions, making the viewer a passive recipient. We shifted from a reading society, where intellectual effort was demanded, to a viewing society, where visuals dominate and participation is minimal. In many ways, the transition from books to television laid the groundwork for the short attention culture we live in today. It set the stage for our craving for quick, bite-sized, easily digestible content. When the internet and social media arrived, they merely amplified a trend that television had already begun. Without television, we might not have slid so quickly into the world of short videos and flash news updates that now define our information diet. If television began to chip away at our ability to focus, the internet was the storm that swept away the rest. By the late 1990s and early 2000s, the internet had entered everyday life, opening up an unprecedented world of information. But alongside this explosion of knowledge, it also reshaped how our brains process information. In The Shallows, Nicholas Carr argued that the internet doesn't just deliver content, it reprograms our thinking, conditioning us to skim, to jump from one hyperlink to the next, instead of patiently diving deep into a subject. A famous study from Stanford University showed that heavy multitaskers online actually performed worse at focusing compared to light multitaskers. Their brains struggled to filter out irrelevant information because attention was constantly being pulled in multiple directions. I once heard a colleague in California describe a student named Daniel. Bright and capable, Daniel studied engineering but always had 10 tabs open: Wikipedia, YouTube, Reddit, and social media, all at once. The result? It took him twice as long to grasp concepts compared to classmates who stayed focused on textbooks. That's the fragmented brain in action. Think about your own habits. How often do you intend to read a full New York Times article, only to quit after a few paragraphs and end up scrolling comments or clicking on a recommended video? The internet has trained us to read differently, not in a linear flow, but by skimming, scanning, and hopping. It's like exercising your brain in reverse. You strengthen impatience while weakening persistence. What makes this powerful is the brain's neuroplasticity, its ability to adapt. Spend years reading books, and your brain builds networks for deep focus. Spend years clicking, swiping, and binging short videos, and your brain rewires itself to favor rapid shifts and instant responses. The problem is that this habit makes sustained attention, the kind needed for learning, research, and creativity, harder than ever. I remember speaking with a professor at MIT who admitted that many students now request summaries, short PDFs, or recorded lectures instead of reading hundreds of pages on their own. He said it's not just laziness, it's the product of brains reshaped by fast, bite-sized information. We're living in an age where intellectual patience is quietly vanishing. The internet is, in many ways, a massive machine designed to capture attention. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, all run on algorithms that maximize screen time. Every notification, every like, every autoplay video is a tiny hit of dopamine. Stanford neuroscientist Anna Lemke has called this the digital dopamine explosion. Our brains crave just one more click, one more video, one more alert, and our attention splinters into countless fragments. I recall an old friend, Laura, who admitted she couldn't finish a book anymore. She said that within minutes of opening her Kindle, she'd feel the urge to check her phone for texts or emails. She joked, "My brain feels like a browser with 30 tabs open all the time." It sounded funny, but it was true. The internet-era brain operates like an overloaded computer, constantly running multiple windows, never fully focused on one task. You can see this everywhere: watching a movie while scrolling your phone, opening your laptop for work only to end up on YouTube, chatting with friends while sneaking glances at notifications. Piece by piece, these habits add up to a new way of living, always busy, always online, but rarely truly present. And that may be the internet's greatest cost: a fragmented brain, unable to find stillness or deep focus. If the internet created a fragmented environment, then social media platforms are the master engineers of exploiting that fragmentation. Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram are not just entertainment tools, they're designed as digital slot machines, where every swipe or click offers a tiny reward that keeps you hooked. This is no accident but the result of decades of research in neuroscience and behavioral psychology. Engineers in Silicon Valley understand the dopamine system very well. Every time you get a like or a comment, your brain releases a small burst of dopamine, creating excitement. What makes it addictive is not certainty, but uncertainty, just like pulling the lever of a slot machine in Las Vegas. You never know when you'll hit the jackpot. This variable reward schedule is one of the strongest psychological triggers. And Facebook built it into their platform early on. TikTok and Instagram followed the same playbook. A 2020 study published in Nature Communications analyzed millions of social media interactions and found that the habit of constantly checking your phone is not about needing information but about anticipating unpredictable rewards. That's why many Americans admit they check their phones over 150 to 200 times a day. Even without a clear reason. We think we control our devices, but in reality, they control us. Take the story of David, a high school teacher from California. He confessed that TikTok consumed hours of his evenings. He would open the app planning to watch a few funny clips. But suddenly 2 hours had passed. Strangely, he couldn't even remember what he had watched, only that his brain felt continuously pumped with novelty. This is the clearest sign of addictive design, keeping you engaged for as long as possible, regardless of value. The danger goes beyond wasted time. These platforms reshape our emotions and social behaviors. Researchers at the University of Pennsylvania conducted an experiment where students were asked to limit Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat use to just 10 minutes per day per platform for 3 weeks. The results were striking. Levels of anxiety and loneliness decreased significantly, while life satisfaction increased. This proves that these apps are not neutral tools. They directly interfere with our moods, and sometimes worsen psychological problems. Consider YouTube's recommendation system. Its algorithm doesn't prioritize quality content but content that keeps you watching. That's why someone may start with a cooking tutorial but, 30 minutes later, end up lost in an endless loop of entertainment clips. TikTok pushes this further by creating a truly infinite feed. Just swipe down, and a bottomless world of content opens up. It's the perfect addictive formula. Simple, endless, and unpredictable. The cost of this convenience is that our brains are being rewired to crave faster, stronger, and more frequent stimulation. Like a coffee drinker who needs more cups to stay awake, we need bigger dopamine hits to feel excited. As a result, slow and meaningful activities, reading a book, having a face-to-face conversation, or taking a walk outside, start to feel boring. Social media has shifted the emotional baseline, turning us into unconscious dopamine consumers. One of the things I find most striking is this. The very people who created these addictive technologies were among the first to warn us about them. They understood exactly how powerful time on screen design could be, because they helped build it. The irony is that while millions around the world became glued to iPhones, iPads, and Facebook, the children of these tech leaders were carefully shielded from the very products they gave to us. Take Steve Jobs, the father of the iPhone. Back in 2010, when Apple introduced the iPad, a New York Times reporter asked if his kids used it. His answer shocked many. They haven't used it. At the Jobs household, family dinners were about conversation, not screens. He wanted his children to grow up with books and real human interaction, not glowing rectangles. Bill Gates, the founder of Microsoft, once admitted that his children weren't allowed to have phones until age 14. The Gates family also had strict screen curfews, especially before bedtime. When someone as powerful as Gates draws such hard boundaries, it says more than any scientific paper. He knew these devices could shape the human mind. Even Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, has said that he and his wife limit their children's exposure to screens and social media. Tech insiders understand better than anyone that growing up in a world saturated with digital dopamine can distort a child's development. I think of my friend Linda, a high school teacher in Seattle. She told me that many parents who work in tech companies are extremely strict about managing their kids' screen time. Meanwhile, other students, whose parents don't work in the industry, spend hours lost on TikTok and YouTube. Linda described it as an invisible unfairness. The children of tech creators are protected, while the rest of society's kids become the test subjects. And this isn't just anecdotal. Sean Parker, Facebook's former president, once admitted publicly, "We were exploiting a vulnerability in human psychology. Our goal was to consume as much of your time and attention as possible." When someone from the inside says that, it's hard to argue these platforms are harmless. The scarier part is that the impact reaches beyond individuals into culture itself. Netflix now designs shows for distracted audiences, the kind who watch while scrolling on their phones. Hollywood directors admit they cut scenes faster, with more rapid pacing, because they know audiences will drift away within minutes. Technology hasn't just changed how we consume art, it has reshaped how art is created. If we now understand that our brains are being hacked by technology platforms, the big question is, can we ever regain our focus? The good news is yes. The human brain is highly plastic, it can change, adapt, and recover when trained the right way. Neuroscience has shown this repeatedly. Just like a weak muscle can grow stronger through regular exercise, our ability to focus can be rebuilt. The first and hardest step is learning how to turn the screen off. A study from Harvard found that reducing smartphone use by just 30% led to significantly lower stress and anxiety in only 2 weeks. This shows that you don't need to quit technology completely, you just need healthy boundaries. A single, tech-free day can act like a mental detox, giving your brain the rest it needs. I have a friend in California named David, a busy attorney who was constantly tied to emails and notifications. He decided to try a tech-free Sunday. At first, he felt restless, almost reaching for his phone every few minutes. But within 3 weeks, he noticed sharper focus at work, better short-term memory, and most importantly, a quiet joy in reading bedtime stories to his kids, something he rarely had patience for before. The next step is replacing addictive content with activities that train focus. Reading books is a classic example. When you read, your brain must follow a long, continuous line of thought, strengthening deep concentration. A Stanford study showed that reading just 20 minutes a day not only improves focus but also boosts empathy. In other words, reading makes you smarter and kinder at the same time. Simple habits like walking in nature, meditating, or journaling also have powerful effects. In one Japanese experiment, Participants who took a 15-minute, phone-free walk each day saw their cortisol, the stress hormone, drop by 12% on average. Lower cortisol meant their brains were calmer and more capable of sustained focus. Sometimes the solution isn't high-tech, but simply reconnecting with natural rhythms. Another important step is changing how we consume art and entertainment. Try turning off your phone and watching a movie from start to finish in the theater. Or attending a live concert without distractions. These experiences retrain the brain to be fully present, to savor depth instead of surface-level stimulation. And finally, we need to relearn how to accept boredom. Many Americans, especially young people, treat boredom as the enemy and immediately reach for their phones. But psychologists at the University of Central Lancashire discovered that boredom can actually fuel creativity. When the brain drifts into its default mode, fresh ideas often emerge. In short, learning to sit with boredom may be the first step toward reclaiming focus. After walking through this entire journey, from the shift from reading culture to television, the explosion of the internet, and the platforms deliberately designed to hijack our attention, a clear picture emerges. Modern society has fragmented our minds, weakened our patience, and made it harder than ever to focus. But just like a river can be redirected, the human mind can also be trained and restored to balance. The most important truth I want you to remember is this: focus is not a gift. It's a skill that must be protected and nurtured every single day. If you don't take charge, hundreds of tech companies will gladly take it for you. But every time you choose to put down your phone, read a book, take a walk outside, or simply sit in silence and embrace boredom, you are declaring, I am in control of my brain, not the other way around. Psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, the father of the concept of flow, discovered that our deepest happiness doesn't come from instant entertainment, but from those rare moments when we are fully immersed in a meaningful activity. And to reach that state, you need focus. In other words, focus is the doorway to happiness and true freedom of mind. So starting today, I'd like to challenge you. Take just 30 minutes a day without any screens. Read a book, write a few lines in a journal, brew some tea and sit in silence, or simply follow your breath. That small window of time can spark a quiet revolution in your brain, helping you regain peace, creativity, and most importantly, the sense that you are fully alive. If you found this video helpful, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Peaceful Soul, and share it with your friends. Who knows, your small action today might help someone else reclaim their focus and discover peace within. Remember, the modern world will never stop trying to pull you away from yourself. But you always have the choice of focus, the choice of depth, and the choice of a peaceful soul. Thank you for joining me on this journey. I'll see you in the next video.